Some secrets are meant to stay hidden, but this one exploded into chaos. Marvin's shocking move against Akbar is the twist no one saw coming. Everything you thought you knew about power, loyalty, and betrayal in Raising Kanan Season 5 is about to be shattered. Tonight, we uncover how ambition and fear collided to change the game forever. Before the shocking moment, it's important to understand the world Marvin and Akbar lived in. Marvin wasn't just another player in the streets. He was smart, calculated, and always watching everyone around him. He had spent years slowly building his influence, making connections, and learning who to trust and who to watch. Marvin's world was a dangerous one, full of people pretending to be loyal while secretly plotting against him. Every decision he made had consequences, and he knew it. He wasn't reckless. He was careful, patient, and always planning 3 steps ahead. Akbar, on the other hand, was the kind of man who commanded respect and fear at the same time. People listened when he spoke, and many followed his rules without question. Akbar had a reputation for being tough, smart, and unpredictable. He didn't trust easily, and anyone trying to climb the ladder in his world had to be ready to prove themselves. The tension between Akbar and Marvin was more than just rivalry. It was a clash of 2 minds, each aware of the other's ambition, and both unwilling to step back. From the start, Marvin admired Akbar's strength, but he also feared it, and fear can be a dangerous motivator. Their paths crossed in ways that seemed small at first, but built into a bigger story. Marvin would notice little things: how Akbar treated his crew, how he handled deals, how he reacted when things went wrong. Every observation added up. Marvin began to understand the patterns of power that ruled their world, and he realized that Akbar, for all his strength, had weaknesses. He wasn't untouchable. No one was. Marvin's ambition wasn't just about survival. It was about claiming control and proving he could outsmart a man everyone else thought unbeatable. Meanwhile, Akbar was also aware of Marvin. He had seen the younger man's intelligence and ambition, and it made him cautious. Akbar respected people who were clever, but he hated threats. He watched Marvin closely, noting his moves, his alliances, and even his hesitations. Akbar's intuition was sharp, but Marvin's patience and cunning were sharper. It was a dangerous balance. Akbar had power and influence, but Marvin had strategy and the element of surprise. Over time, small incidents, disagreements, and power plays added fuel to a fire that neither of them could fully control. In the streets, loyalty was often a matter of convenience. Friends could become enemies in a heartbeat, and even the closest allies had hidden motives. Marvin understood this better than most. He had seen people he trusted betray others for money, status, or survival. He had learned to protect himself, to hide his true intentions, and to act only when the moment was right. This wasn't just about ambition, it was about survival. Every move he made had to consider not just what he wanted, but how it would affect him in the long run. A single misstep could cost him everything. Akbar's world, meanwhile, was built on fear and respect. He had followers, but he also had enemies. Not everyone who seemed loyal truly was. Some plotted behind his back, hoping to take a chance when the opportunity arose. Akbar had survived this world because he was cautious and decisive. He knew that one wrong decision could bring disaster, and he lived with that knowledge every day. His power came with the constant pressure of staying ahead, of predicting the moves of people like Marvin who could challenge him in ways others couldn't. The tension between Marvin and Akbar wasn't sudden. It had been growing quietly, almost imperceptibly, until the moment when ambition, fear, and survival instincts collided. Every conversation, every small conflict, and every decision they made added to a storm that was building. Unseen by most, but impossible to ignore by those who understood the game. Marvin had a plan, but it required perfect timing and absolute secrecy. One wrong move, and it wouldn't just fail, it would end him. Yet, despite the risks, Marvin knew he had reached a point where he couldn't turn back. By the time the season reached this point, viewers could see the subtle signs of tension even if they didn't fully understand the scale of what was coming. The way Marvin looked at Akbar, the way he analyzed every situation. The quiet moments of plotting behind closed doors, they all hinted at a confrontation that would be more than just a clash of two men. It was a collision of minds, wills, and ambition, a moment that would change everything for both of them and everyone around them. The stage was set, and all that remained was the breaking point that would ignite one of the most shocking twists in the season. The tension between Marvin and Akbar didn't appear overnight. It had been simmering beneath the surface for weeks, slowly building with every deal, every conversation, and every glance that carried unspoken meaning. Marvin's mind was always active, constantly calculating, watching how people reacted, where they slipped, and how their weaknesses could be used. He understood that in their world, power wasn't just taken, it was observed, waited for, and claimed at the exact right moment. Every small interaction between him and Akbar added to a larger picture, one that was invisible to everyone else but crystal clear to Marvin. At first, the conflict seemed minor, a disagreement over territory. Here, a slight insult there, moments that to outsiders might have looked trivial or accidental. But Marvin noticed the patterns. Akbar's temper, his subtle displays of dominance, the way he tested loyalty by watching reactions, these were all pieces of a puzzle. Marvin also noticed how others around Akbar were reacting, some nervous, some overconfident, some already plotting their own moves. It became clear to him that Akbar, while strong, relied heavily on appearances and the loyalty of others, and appearances could be manipulated. Marvin knew that if he acted carefully, the right move could shift the balance of power entirely in his favor. The tension escalated when small betrayals began to appear, almost as if the streets themselves were conspiring to push Marvin and Akbar toward a breaking point. Deals that should have gone smoothly fell apart. Trusted allies made mistakes or acted suspiciously, forcing Marvin to adapt quickly. Every failure or betrayal he observed in Akbar's crew became a lesson in how fragile Akbar's control really was. Marvin started to see cracks that no one else dared to notice. It wasn't enough for him to just survive. He had to turn these cracks into an opening. And as he watched, a dangerous thought took root. What if the only way to secure his position was to eliminate the obstacle entirely? Meanwhile, Akbar's awareness of Marvin's intelligence and ambition grew steadily. Akbar could sense the younger man was clever, always calculating, and increasingly unpredictable. He began to test Marvin, throwing subtle challenges, making demands, and even creating situations where loyalty and courage would be pushed to their limits. Each test brought out a side of Marvin that was sharp, cautious, and, at times, ruthless. Every interaction was a psychological game, a silent war, fought with words, actions, and glances rather than open conflict. The tension between them was like a tightly wound spring, and the energy it created was visible in every meeting, every negotiation, and every silent exchange in the streets. Everyone noticed the change. People started whispering, sensing that a shift in power was coming, but no one could predict the scale of it. Marvin moved quietly, making alliances, reinforcing loyalty with some while subtly testing others. He learned who could be trusted to follow him without question and who might betray him at the first opportunity. His understanding of human behavior gave him an advantage that even Akbar struggled to counter. The more he studied Akbar, the more he realized that fear and intimidation alone couldn't maintain control. Akbar's authority depended on perception, and perception could be carefully dismantled as the days passed. Small confrontations grew sharper, and subtle threats became unavoidable. Marvin found himself cornered in moments, forced to make decisions under pressure that could either protect him or expose him. Each time, he analyzed every detail, weighing risks and predicting outcomes. He began to plan with surgical precision, imagining every possible scenario and rehearsing responses to them. At the same time, he had to maintain his public loyalty and composure, showing no sign of aggression while internally preparing for a decisive move The danger was real, but Marvin thrived under pressure. The tighter the noose, the sharper his focus. The buildup reached its peak when a series of incidents finally pushed the tension to a boiling point. Words were exchanged that could not be taken back. Trust was broken, even in the smallest gestures. Every subtle threat, every hint of betrayal, and every observation Marvin had made combined to create a single, undeniable truth. If he didn't act, he could lose everything. The stakes were higher than ever, and the time for patience had passed. Marvin was now positioned to strike, with every variable calculated and every opportunity aligned. The stage was set for a confrontation that would leave no room for doubt, fear, or hesitation. Not in this world. Power was a living thing, constantly shifting, testing everyone in its path. Marvin had recognized the moment when patience became danger, and hesitation became weakness. He understood that the line between survival and annihilation was thin, and that sometimes the only way to secure a future was to act decisively, even ruthlessly. By now, the tension wasn't just about ambition or ego. It was about life, control, and the raw reality of their dangerous world. The final act of this silent, simmering war was approaching, and no one outside Marvin's mind could see the full plan, the full intent, or the full storm that was about to erupt. The moment that had been building for weeks finally arrived, and when it did, it was more shocking than anyone could have imagined. Marvin had studied Akbar, tracked his habits, and waited for the perfect opening. Every move he made before this was preparation, a careful threading of strategy that only someone with his patience and intelligence could execute. And now, everything converged on a single, irreversible act. Marvin's mind was clear, his resolve unshakable, and in that instant, the tension that had been simmering between them erupted into violence. The world around them seemed to freeze for a moment, as if even the streets recognized the gravity of what was about to unfold. Akbar, powerful and confident, didn't see it coming. He had underestimated Marvin's willingness to cross the line, to act in a way that went beyond ambition and fear and entered the realm of survival. Up until this point, Akbar had assumed that Marvin would play by the unspoken rules, that his loyalty or at least his calculated restraint would hold. But in that final moment, those assumptions shattered. Marvin moved with precision, striking in a way that was quick, decisive, and devastating. It wasn't just the physical act of violence that shocked everyone. It was the psychological impact. The realization that someone who had always seemed subordinate could suddenly wield ultimate control. The streets and corners of their world were full of witnesses to tension, whispers, and rumors. But even they could not predict the scale of Marvin's action. The murder wasn't chaotic or impulsive, it was calculated, almost surgical. Marvin understood the environment, the timing, and the consequences. Each second was measured, each movement deliberate. When the final blow landed, it wasn't just Akbar who fell. The foundation of power and influence he had built over the years began to crumble in an instant. Marvin's choice changed everything. His decision wasn't just about removing an obstacle, it was a declaration. He was no longer a player in the game. He was now the one holding the pieces. The aftermath of the murder was immediate and electric. Shockwaves rippled through Akbar's crew, friends, and rivals alike. People who had once been confident and untouchable now moved cautiously, reevaluating their positions and alliances. The streets that had once echoed with Akbar's commands now held silence, tension, and fear. Marvin's act had not just eliminated a rival, it had disrupted the entire balance of power. Those who had underestimated him before now watched him carefully, realizing that the man they had once overlooked was capable of altering the course of everything in his world. Every glance, every whisper, every movement became charged with new meaning. Even as the immediate chaos unfolded, Marvin remained composed. This was the moment he had prepared for, and he knew the importance of controlling not just the act, but its consequences. He had anticipated the reactions of those around him, predicting confusion, fear, and their urgent scramble to fill the void. Akbar left behind. In a world where loyalty was fragile and alliances could shift overnight, Marvin understood that his survival and rise depended on more than just action, it depended on perception, timing, and the way he managed the ripple effects of the murder. Each decision he had made leading up to this point had been a step toward ensuring that this single, decisive act would place him in a position of strength, yet even with careful planning. The weight of the moment pressed on him. There was no turning back, no undoing what had been done. The murder marked a turning point. A line that once crossed would change not only Marvin's path but the trajectory of everyone around him. The world that had seemed stable, predictable, and governed by known rules was now thrown into uncertainty. Trust became fragile, alliances shifted, and the constant tension of the streets intensified. Marvin had achieved what few could. He had taken control of a situation that had seemed impossible to domina. But the cost was high, and the consequences were far-reaching. Marvin's act was not just a physical confrontation, it was a psychological masterstroke. He knew that the most powerful impact wasn't just in what he did but in how others perceived it. Fear, respect, and caution spread instantly among those who had once considered him subordinate. The act forced everyone to reassess not just their strategy but their understanding of Marvin himself. He was no longer just a calculating player. He was a man willing to take risks, willing to act decisively, and capable of altering destinies. In a single moment, he had rewritten the rules of his world, proving that power belonged not only to those with influence but to those with vision, patience, and the courage to act when the moment demanded it. By the time the shock settled and the reality of Akbar's death became undeniable, the streets had already begun to shift. Alliances fractured, whispers became plans, and new rivalries began to take shape. The balance of power that had once seemed set in stone was now fluid, and Marvin stood at the center, calm, aware, and ready. This murder wasn't the end of the story, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one in which every decision would carry weight, every action would have consequences, and the line between survival and dominance had never been thinner. Marvin had struck first, but the war for control was only just beginning, and the world around him would never be the same again. The moment Akbar fell, the world around him didn't just react, it trembled. Marvin's act was not merely an ending. It was a catalyst that reshaped everything in its path. Within seconds, the streets, the crews, and the alliances that had once seemed stable began to feel the tremor of his actions. People who had been loyal to Akbar didn't know where to turn, and those who had harbored ambition or resentment toward him saw an opportunity that they couldn't ignore. Chaos spread quickly. Yet it was the type of chaos that was calculated, subtle, and deadly, because in this world, everyone knew that power vacuums never stayed empty for long. Marvin had not just removed a rival. He had created a storm, and the people caught in it didn't even realize how deeply their lives had changed. The immediate aftermath was a mixture of fear, disbelief, and calculation. Akbar's closest allies were frozen, struggling to comprehend the loss and to determine their next steps. Some felt betrayed by the suddenness of the act, even if they had long suspected tension between Marvin and Akbar. Others felt relief, quietly reassessing loyalties and thinking about who now had the power to protect them or give them opportunities. In the streets, word spread quickly, rumors grew wild, whispers became threats, and the undercurrent of fear permeated every interaction. Every face, every glance, and every gesture carried weight, because everyone understood that the balance of power had shifted overnight, and survival now demanded vigilance, cunning, and adaptability. Marvin, for his part, remained poised. This was the moment he had been preparing for, but he also understood that the murder itself was only the beginning. Controlling the aftermath required more than strategy, it required understanding human nature, predicting reactions, and manipulating perception. He knew that showing weakness now could undo everything he had gained. Those who had underestimated him before were now watching him closely, trying to gauge whether this act was impulsive or part of a larger plan. Marvin made every move deliberate, careful to consolidate influence and subtly remind the streets that while Akbar was gone, he the younger, underestimated man was now the one to be reckoned with. Power, however, is never static, as the dust settled. Rival crews and ambitious individuals began testing the new boundaries. Some saw this as an opportunity to expand their territories or forge new alliances, while others simply sought revenge. In the tension-filled hours and days following Akbar's death, Marvin had to navigate a world that was simultaneously fearful of him and eager to challenge him. Each conversation, each negotiation, each subtle gesture became a test of his authority, patience, and intelligence. He could no longer afford mistakes. Any lapse could invite disaster. Yet, the very act of taking decisive action elevated him. In the eyes of those who valued courage, initiative, and ruthlessness, qualities that could no longer be ignored. The psychological impact of the murder was just as profound as the practical consequences. People began to question their assumptions, reassess their loyalties, and reconsider who truly held power. Marvin's decision forced others to confront uncomfortable truths. Influence was not about reputatio and alone, it was about action. Control was not guaranteed by fear or respect alone, but by the ability to act when the moment demanded it. This shift in perception rippled through the world around him. Friends became cautious, enemies became wary, and everyone who had once measured strength based on past accomplishments now had to look at Marvin in a new, dangerous light. His presence was no longer just noticed, it was felt deeply and irreversibly. Meanwhile, within the broader narrative of Raising Kanan Season 5, Marvin's actions set off a chain reaction. Characters previously operating in predictable patterns were now forced to adapt, creating a tension that would drive conflicts for episodes to come. Alliances would fracture,